Hello and welcome back. We are here to talk about the 1v1 landscape and how it has changed. How has it changed for Gamers 8 purposes? Does 1v1s even matter for Gamers 8? Let's get right into it. First, I want to talk about what happened this past week. We had basically two big tournaments for the 1v1 space for players basically practicing for Gamers 8. We'll explain the Gamers 8 format in a little bit. If you don't know, it's basically a crew battle 3v3, 2v2, and 1v1. So that's why players have to practice their ones and twos a little bit. I haven't seen too much twos action going on right now. Mostly focused around ones. But we'll get into like the nitty gritty of the format when we talk about Gamers 8 and if any of these 1v1 results actually matter for that tournament. So let's get into it. First off, we had Fiesta. Basically took 12 players and threw them into a big old bracket, as you can see down here. Basically did 12 players, some with buys in best of 5 format for 1v1s, and then moved on the top 4 into just a single elim bracket. So a couple players had more of a disadvantage, but at the same time, I bet a lot of these players were looking for practice. Probably weren't too upset to be in that round 1 because they want to see how it all goes. First off, let's talk about O'Khaled because he will not be playing in Gamers 8. Nupo will be playing for Falcons, which is a huge pickup. Moves Falcons up the list, obviously, for teams that could possibly win it. So his results, while not great here, they don't really matter in the Gamers 8 time frame. But so about Addo, because I think Addo showed up here, and I think this is a good sign. The thing you need to do in ones in Gamers 8 is you don't necessarily have to, win everything. But if you can keep series close, then you're looking good. Because that means you can trade a win at any moment versus anyone in the ones space. And we see it here versus apparently Jack, a very good ones player. He pulled off the win. He even won game 1, which again I think is probably the most crucial game in these in terms of Gamers 8 performance. But he won game 1, lost the next 2, but then countered Appjack and won the last 2 games. So that is huge for him. Then against Moxie, he lost game 1, countered, won the next 2, then lost the last 2. So the complete opposite. Lucky for him, Moxie's not in Gamers 8, so he doesn't have to worry about that. Roas, always doing well in ones, and that's what you expect. He wins this whole entire tournament. He took down Chronic, which is big compared to the performance what Chronic did in the next tournament that we'll talk about in a little bit, the Chalk Cast Duels. And also, he win the whole thing helps. But I think what's more important out of this first grouping, and I think it's probably the most important thing you should take away, is that Vatira is playing pretty well in ones. And that is a scary sign. We see it here, Vatira versus Roas, won game 1 again, that's pretty important. Then won game 4, but lost the rest, which is fine. He took down Nas, counted him in 3 games straight, and he took down Rise, who lost only in game 3. Like, if Vatira is playing well, that is a great sign. Some players that maybe it's trending a little bit down towards, maybe Appjack, who's only 1 series. It's not a huge deal. Yan as well. 3-0 Jorius, and Jorius is probably on that list as like kind of trending down. Yeah, 3-0 there, and I believe he did pretty well the last time around. I think he was 4-1 last Gamers 8, really helping Furia to their win. And then he lost 3-0 as well to Mawk. But again, that 3-0 to Mawk when Mawk's beat everyone else doesn't look that bad, right? So these were the results from the Fear Fest. Let's move over to the Chalkcast Duel. So this was for $5,000, I think. I can't remember the exact prize and split. Here we go. Prize and split down to top 8. Very nice of them to go down to top 8. I always like when the prize pool is split up a little bit more. I think it benefits pretty much everyone. Because if you're a good player on a good team, you're getting paid well anyway. So why not split it up a little bit more? But let's talk about these results. A couple things I want to mention here in this 1v1 space is, man, do I hate 4-player groups. I get probably scheduling issues, and if you have to, do it. But, oh, man, do I hate it. And I hate when people bring up that this is the best format. Like, do GSL, just 4-team groups or 4-player groups in terms of ones. The main issue, and I brought this up many times before, so if you heard this, I'm sorry, is that the 2-3 matchup very likely just rematches again in the lower bracket, so the first matchup does not matter. And this happened in all 4 brackets, not necessarily the 2-3 matchup, but there was a rematch in the lower bracket final in all 4 matches, and the person who lost the first one went 3-1 when they played again. So just not a huge fan. Like, I'd rather them split these up, turn this bracket basically into one extra round here, and do a lower bracket another round, and just split up those players like a bit more so we don't get any rematches. But looking through this, really quick, let's just go through each group. Group A with Mock did very well. Ocala, he was taking out Appjack, which is not a great sign for Appjack, but Appjack does fight back in the lower bracket and takes him down. So a little bit of a better sight there. Roas doing Roas things. 3-0s are very important ones right now, because if you get the 3-0s in Gamers8, it's looking very likely that you could do it versus many of the players. So Roas with 3-0s there. Toxic also making it through. Yan, once again, falling short, only taking down Card, which is not the greatest result for him. CRR doing very well. He will not be at Gamers8, though. First Killer going down 3-0 and 3-1 to Addo as well is not a good sign for FaZe. FaZe has other issues anyway. FaZe is basically a team that is not going to be competing very well at Gamers8. We'll get into them in a little bit. But Addo, again, good results from him. Very, very good. So that's what you want to see. I think Team Liquid could be a force here at Gamers8 if he keeps that up. CRR, again, he always does well. Go over here. Reezers, basically doing the same thing he did last time around at the last Gamers8. Doing pretty well. Chronic, though, taking the cake here. Taking down Nupo as well, which is big. Daniel also gets the 3-0 on Nupo. So not a great start to his Falcons career, but I think a lot of people think he'll bounce back going into the Gamers8 tournament. And then Daniel, he advances as well. So Chronic and Daniel, USA, baby. Let's go. We got 2 players in there. Daniel, that's a good sign for him. To go 3-0 twice, the Reezers lost, not great, but he got it back later on. Again, these rematches are killer, man. They're absolutely killer. Yeah, moving on. We go down to the lower bracket. Quarters, Toxic winning over Addo. Apparently, Jack taking down Daniel. That's a big win for him. Appjack losing to CRR, and then Mock doing work down there. Chronic moving up in the uppers versus Mock, and Roas taking down CRR. So basically, your top 4 were your top 4. Didn't really matter. Let's just rearrange them and do another bracket. So we got it here. Mock versus Roas 4-1, and then Chronic over CRR 4-2. And so this is a good sign for Gen G, because Chronic and Appjack are both playing well. And you can mix and match based on how hot or cold these players are feeling. And sometimes, these players know, and one's like, I'm not really feeling it today. Or maybe if they're in a long series and they have to play 2 1v1s, they can mix and match as well. So that's a positive for Gen G. We'll see if it actually pays off or if it even matters. But Moxie winning the whole tournament. Congrats to him. It's always nice to see people get in the bag that are not going to be at Gamers8. So that's always nice. So congrats to him. All right, so we got that done. Now let's look at Gamers8 as a whole, basically. Basically, here's the format. And it's a little bit of an interesting format. I'm not sure if I really necessarily like it for crew battles, and I'll give my reasons for it right now. Basically, it's a glorified 3v3 tournament where they mix in a little bit of other modes, which I would rather them go more full ham into those other modes. I would rather it be like, hey, game 2 and 4 are 3v3, the other 3 are different, or something like that. So you start with 1s or whatever, just to get a more high percentage chance that you're playing the other modes. Because right now, 3v3 takes up 60% of these games, and then the 1v1 and 2v2 mode, they each only get 1 match. So they're 20% each. So it's really not a huge deal to not focus on it. If you focus on your 3s game, you'll be fine. Maybe sprinkle in a little bit of 2s, and you'll be okay. You don't necessarily need a 1s player to win these tournaments, because they can only influence 1 match, right? So as long as you don't go to game 5, then you should be fine. And then when you go to BO7, we still have tons of threes. 4 of the matches are threes, but at least we get 2 matches in either 1v1 or 2v2. So it's the same format for the first 5 games. And then game 6 is based on the loser of game 5. Basically, it blocks reverse sweeps because the few instances where this can happen is either teams are tied 2-2. Game 5 goes, a team is now leading 3-2, so the team behind them will get the pick, can try and force a game 7. A team is up 3-1, and then in game 5, they lose again, so it's 3-2. Then that team that is in the lead 3-2 is going to be able to pick what match they want to close out the series before game 7. So those are basically the 2 instances that can occur. It's still an interesting format, but again, I wish it was like games 2, 4, and 6 were 3v3 or something like that, and then we get in one extra 1v1 or 2v2. But who knows? I'm not sure why they choose it this way. Maybe they want to mostly focus on threes, and that's where we get into like power ranking these teams going into Gamers8. Really, all you have to do is look at these brackets and say who are good 3v3 teams, and then you go from there, right? So, good 3v3 teams, I think we all know the top 3 teams in the world, easily, by far, are Vitality, K-Corp, and BDS. BDS, maybe it's the one team that doesn't really have a ones player, but their twos game is very strong, so we'll see if it even plays a factor. But if they can dominate teams, which they did yet again at the World Championship, outside the French 3, they should be fine. So BDS, they're still very strong. Maybe the weakest of the 3, because their 1v1 game is a little bit weaker. So maybe they come down a notch, right? Maybe they fall below K-Corp because they've just passed K-Corp with wins in Boston and the World Championship, right? K-Corp, you go, again, great 3s team. They'll have a good 2s team. But Vatira looks like he's playing 1s and looks like he's doing fairly well, which is a good sign because it is a threat now. If you're going to pick 1s against K-Corp, you could lose that match, right? So I think K-Corp bumps up probably to number 2 in power rankings over BDS because of that slight problem there. But it's not much. It's still like 2A and 2B. And then you have Vitality, which you don't have to worry about Vitality. They didn't compete in any of these 1s matches or anything like that, but you assume Zen will be ready to go. Their 2s is also very strong. Their 3s is the best in the world. So they don't really have anything to worry about. In this group by itself, like, it's not a pretty group, honestly. Like, Vitality should easily walk out of this group, and then like G2 Optic or Oxygen, depending on the day. Oxygen is one of those teams that I'm still waiting to see actually do something, but they haven't. So probably between G2 and Optic. And it just comes down to how good G2 is doing in 3s. I think Optic could take it. G2, I would say it's like coin tossy, and Oxygen is your dark horse, right? In this group, you have Gen G. We talked about it. I think Gen G's very strong here. They're still a good 3s team. They're still a top 8 3s team. They're probably the best NA team anyway, so they're probably number 5 behind Liquid. They should be fine. Their 1s is good. They also have 2 options at 1s, so I wouldn't worry too much about them. But we'll see, because Monkeys, Reezers is there as well, so we'll see if he can cause some havoc. But it's doubtful that it'll cause havoc to win a series. So unless their 3s just goes poorly, right? So Gen G coming out, probably here, and BDS coming out. I don't see many other options. Maybe Twisted Minds, maybe, but yeah, I don't really see it. I see it as BDS and Gen G pretty clearly out of this group. And again, these groups, like, the only thing I don't like is the lower bracket finals. If you just mix and match the lower bracket finals, I would love that. So teams can kind of break out of their group at some point, right? Moving on. We got K-Corp. I think they're looking very strong. FaZe is in an awkward spot. SIP is not going to Gamers8, and they couldn't change their roster. The deadline supposedly was August 1st, according to Chrome, even though teams were invited or teams announced moves later, like BDS was invited later, and Nupo was added to Falcons, at least in an announcement, later. So FaZe is not really thrilled about that. It's kind of unfortunate that they couldn't try and just make an exception, like, hey, like that this is an extreme reason, like with Sip, he just couldn't come because he's on new medication and it's just not working right now and he's not feeling good. So, like, hey, try and fill that spot in. That would have been nice, but oh well, it's not gonna happen. Chrome is gonna play. So their threes game is shot. First code's not even doing that great in ones. Chrome is grinding, and he did go from Grand Champ 1 all the way up to like high Grand Champ 3, I think it is right now. But I just want to say about like half a year ago, I played him in Grand Champ 1 and toasted him. All right. It was probably like a year ago. Like I think it was half a year ago, but time is irrelevant. But I toasted him. All right. So put me in the lineup phase next time around. Okay. But Chrome, we'll see how they do in threes. I mean, I think there's still a chance they get by Pioneers. I'm sorry, Pioneers, but there's still a chance there because, again, as long as Chrome only played threes, he has played more than half the matches, but they could win the other one. So I think there's still a chance FaZe gets by a couple teams, but like ultimately it's not going to happen against K-Corp. It's not going to happen against Falcons. These two teams should make it out. Furia is your defending champs. They have a shot. It's hard to tell exactly where they're at. Their threes game, the last time we saw it, wasn't great. Have they figured out their threes game? We'll see. They could trade with Falcons. Falcons obviously had a good world championship. But now they have Nupo. It's brand new players to the roster. Normally, the honeymoon phase is going to actually help you, but we'll see. Like, I would still go Falcons here. I would go K-Corp. Falcons are pretty big favorites here. And then finally, the last group. And so this is the only group without a top 8 team from the world championship. We only got one in Team Liquid. Team Liquid, version 1. This is a tough bracket. Because basically Rule 1 is that like 8th team in, it feels like. And then V1 is that team that won the NA qualifiers and looked the best. That could easily be one of these teams that have a bye. V1 is going to be a threat. Absolutely, for sure. Like, it's tough. I think it could be Liquid and V1. Rule 1 obviously can do it too. I think it's a coin flip basically between Rule 1 and V1, the battle of the ones. So we'll see how that all plays out. But that's probably about a coin flip. Team Liquid is not guaranteed either because of how tough this group is, but I would give them a slight edge. They're a better threes team. And now Addo is actually looking pretty good in one. So I think there's I think that's a better shot than we thought. And their twos game is going to be fine too. But they're playing up against some very, very good twos players as well in Rule 1 and V1. So we'll see how that all plays out. This is probably the hardest group, the group of death, in terms of a team has to be knocked out early. And I think this is probably the group of life, Group A. Because like Optic and G2, whoever does make it out is probably the weakest team to come out, in my opinion. So, yeah, that's probably where I would have it right now. But at the end of the day, guys, it's like we have 3 French teams, and they've been so dominant. And 2 of them at least have decent or pretty good ones players, as long as Avadi keeps up this what he's doing. So, like, it looks like a Vitality K-Corp final. It's hard to tell exactly where these brackets end up. Let's see. Group A, first place, versus Group C, first place. Would be on opposite sides of the bracket. Yes, Group C first place, Group A. They could meet up if one of them does lose early in the quarterfinals, though. So we'll see how that works out. But that's probably my final. I think, honestly, yeah, that's the final. BDS will probably still do very well. It's going to be tough. Like, the Middle East teams could, like, Falcons also, like, are right there, right? Because Falcons, we'll see how they play with Nupo. Like, they could win this whole thing, too. So this is a stacked Group A and C in terms of if you win Group A, you're going to have a real test in Group C in that quarterfinal matchup. That's going to be a tough one. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. They don't play Group C. They play Group D. So that's actually pretty useful for them. But Group D is also tough. Like, Group A, honestly, is the weakest group, I would say. But for first place, for the 1 seed, does not have an easy road at all. If Vitality comes out number 1, they play one of Team Liquid Rule 1 or V1. That's a very tough quarterfinals. Then they play either Group B first, which will be BDS, very likely, or Gen G, if they're popping. versus a number 2, K Corp or Falcons, is very, very tough draw. Very tough draw. On the other side, if you win Group C, I think you're looking pretty good. You get Group A, number 2, which should be an easier win, either G2 or Optic. It should be, but again, upsets happen. They haven't recently, but they have. Then you get Group D, first place, which is, while this group is solid, it doesn't have any, like, winners here unless V1 really pops, right? Liquid, I guess, could as well, but it's like, it's still weaker than a BDS, K Corp, or Vitality, right? So, not as bad. Versus Group B, number 2, which is also not as bad, I think. Like, Gen G or BDS, number 2, like, Gen G is still a threat, but they're not as threatening as they once were. So, I would say the bottom side of the bracket is a pretty good place to be, very likely. And Group C, whoever wins this group, very likely going to the finals, I would say. Versus probably Vitality in Group A. But it all depends on how it all plays out. And this video is going way too long. It started 21 minutes. So it's supposed to be 10 to 15 minutes. But I just want to talk about Gamers8 a little bit here and the 1v1s. Do I think 1v1s will actually matter? Probably not that much. Especially with how close a lot of these matches have been. A lot of 3-2s and all that in these show matches. I don't really think it's going to come down to the ones game. It's really going to come down to how do teams ride the momentum from game mode to game mode. When someone has to sit, how do they come back and play right after? It is a unique format, and it is probably a very difficult one for a lot of the players that don't play in the 1s and 2s because they got to like take 5 minutes off, probably just go to free play while their player's playing, and then come right back into it, right? So we'll see how it all plays out. But honestly, my final is probably Vitality versus K Corp. Because I think K Corp will best Falcons, but it's going to be tough. Falcons probably make it to the semis. Like, I could see Falcons being a BDS. I could see that. But we'll see. Yeah, we'll say Falcons top 4. BDS falls out in quarters. And then the last spots was at Vitality, Falcons, K Corp. And then what do we got? Group D, first place versus Group B, second place. That's tough. You know what? I'll give it to Ado. I'm going to go Team Liquid. We'll have Team Liquid bounce back up here again. So it just means no NA in top 4 for the 3rd straight tournament, which would be very sad. But honestly, there hasn't been that many upsets. So we'll see how it all plays out. Let me know what you guys think about this Gamers8 format, the brackets, and all of that, and how much you like watching ones games, because I know a lot of people love watching ones. I would love to see more of like RLCS ones thing from time to time, even if it's like a short thing, you know, just throw it together for a few months. Why not? And pop it off, or even the 2s, because I like 2s as well. But that'll do it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Sorry that it was a little bit longer, but I hope you guys had fun. And just let me know, what do you think about anything? Comments, throw them in there. It helps out YouTube algorithms, like all that stuff. I appreciate all the views that I've been getting, and we'll keep popping out videos. So thank you for your time. We'll catch you later. Bye-bye.